Hello, Savannah. Hello, Savannah. And welcome to another edition of Kandily Kesha. It's again a pleasure to be here with you tonight. And we do not want to labor introductions or spend too much time listening to me talk. But what I do want to acknowledge is that we are continuing to educate our electorate. We are continuing to educate the citizens of Savannah. And through that education, we are finding that more and more citizens are engaging. They are plugged in, and they are now holding local officials accountable. They are taking their rightful place in government. And for that, we are so proud. I must say, however, that we have not done this single-handedly. While myself and Alderwoman at Large Miller Blakely and Alderwoman Bryant Lanier of District 1 have been the grassroots servants in these elected offices, we essentially are serving in a way in which we are humble about our services, we are humble about our approach, and thereby giving our citizens more power when it comes to approaching us and approaching issues that are going on in their community. One can say many things about our service, but what they cannot take away from us is the fact that we have enlightened so many people. Now there are more people than ever who know exactly what is going on in local government. They know about local government. They know what our charter reads. They know when our meetings are. They know who the city manager is. They know what our legislative process is, and they know what it has not been. And so for that, again, we are encouraged, but we are not doing it alone. We are not doing it alone. We must think platforms like ATR, All Things Relevant, the Unity Political Action Committee, as well as Better Savannah. These platforms have afforded us an opportunity to expand our reach beyond our platforms of service within the chambers of City Hall. And it is only through these platforms that we are able to not necessarily equalize the narrative, but really tell the truth about what is really going on in our city. Because we find far too often that mainstream media, they deliver messages that are consistent with pushing the business and the agenda of the establishment. The danger in doing that is that we do not give citizens when and if journalists are not exercising integrity, when they are not talented, and when they have been paid and bought off, we find that we create public health issues because we are spewing messages to our citizens that is not consistent with harmony in the corridors of our community when it comes to crime, poverty, homelessness, and even our taxes. And that brings me to my guest tonight, Mr. Chuck Feagin of Better Savannah. Chuck Feagin is a longtime political local guru, if you will, and also national, I think, in some regard. He has his ear to the ground. He has a firm grasp on what goes on in at all levels of government, city, state, local, as well as our national government. And so we have appreciated being able to lend attention and time to him as we have listened to their concerns, but more importantly, listen to their suggestions and recommendations. And so I want to utilize a few minutes of my platform tonight to allow Chuck to talk to us about a very important topic that seems somewhat lost. And the topic is lost, our local option sales taxes. And so I was sharing with Chuck that I think this is one of the areas where we have missed an opportunity to educate the community, but it is important for me to give voice to this issue tonight because of the jeopardy that our city may be in. The lost tax has a major impact on everything that happens in our community with regard to our taxpayers. And it's not only property tax owners, I'm sorry, it's not only property owners, but it's also renters. This ultimately will impact renters. The lost tax pays for streets, roads, infrastructure, as well as any special projects in the downtown corridors of Savannah. And we find that while we are in the midst of negotiations for loss, there's been some maneuvering that is somewhat concerning. Chuck, in the with the layout of our tax schematic, we have E-SPLOS, SPLOS, LOS, and now we are entertaining T-SPLOS. Now, those are broken down into various pennies, how many pennies go here, and I think a total of 4 cents of all of these taxes go to our state.
Go straight to the state, yep.
And so what we want Chatham County to know is that there is an obligation and that the city generates at least a little over 60% of the lost tax dollars. And of that 60%, we have historically or in recent times only pocketed 51% and shared the rest with other municipalities throughout Chatham County. Now, I want to first say this. The city of Savannah is a city within Chatham. While
That's right.
is probably one of the most successful cities within Chatham County, we must say at the same time, she's also one of the most vulnerable and susceptible to those things that will make us more vulnerable if we lost any of this money. And so I'm going to let you just start at the top in terms of identifying again what loss is, how important it is to our coffers of the city of Savannah, what it has been historically, and then tell us, Chuck, what the implications could essentially be if these negotiations go south.
Well, first off, I really appreciate the some might say over the top introduction. I hope I can meet meet all those standards you outlaid there. For everyone that's watching, we're having a discussion simply about sales taxes and property taxes. And so when we think about sales tax in Georgia, the first 4 pennies go straight to the state, just as the Alderwoman was saying. The next potential 4 pennies are up to local the communities to decide. And so if you remember the last several years, in 2019, we had a regular SPLOST vote during the city election cycle. In 2021, last year, we had a E-SPLOST cycle, voted on E-SPLOST for the schools. The E-SPLOST and the SPLOST are, as well as the upcoming T-SPLOST this November that you're being asked to vote on, those are pennies that are for capital projects. So for E-SPLOST, it's schools. For T-SPLOST, it's roads. For regular SPLOST, unfortunately, we did the arena, with one of those SPLOST. So those are for capital projects. The lost penny is known as the 5th penny because it's usually the first penny charged by the local governments in addition to the state sales tax of 4%. The local option sales tax, LOST or LOS, is purely designed to defray the average cost of property taxation at the local municipal level in order to run government services. So when we think about the lost penny, we're talking about $52 million of general fund revenue. And if you're ever in government or are really looking to dig into government, general fund revenue money is really where the ball game is. It's what operates your police department, your fire department, all of your administrative services. It is where you have the most leeway in any given budgeting cycle. Historically, in the past 35, 40 years of lost in Georgia, you've never had what's called a loss certificate change by more than 10% in any given cycle. And so to explain what that means is that because the voters voted on the lost 2 decades ago, as long as all of the governmental bodies that are involved with the lost sign off on it unanimously, we're good to just keep renewing it. So those parties are Chatham County's government and all of the municipalities located within Chatham. And so the last 10 years, Chatham County's government, which is led by Chairman Chester Ellis right now, received around 23% share of the lost certificate for the last 10 years. Right now, the chairman's position is that the county must get at least 50% of the lost revenue on this next certificate, or essentially there's no deal to be had. That's the public reporting. And, to just bring everybody up to speed, if we don't renew this certificate, by January, we face the potential of losing, from 51 million to 0 million of general fund revenue, the result of which would be one of two choices: dramatically raising, and what I mean by dramatically is a 75% increase in the rate of taxation on the millage rate. That would take our millage rate from the 11.72 this council majority just approved all the way up to about 17 to 19 mills, in terms of how we tax our property. Mm-hmm. The other alternative would be to lay off basically the equivalent of all of the full-time equivalent positions gained in the last 2 years, investing in, sanitation department, police department. We would have to give back in terms of layoffs a significant number of full-time equivalent positions without that revenue. Either of those scenarios are significantly damaging to the citizens of Savannah and the Savannah government. And the ask by the chairman, by historical standards, by any standards really, is quite ridiculous.
Yeah.
The ask to go from 23 to 50%, that's horrible.
And we're looking at having to close the gap to the tune of about $100 million a year if they were to rob us of 50%. And so the thought that the city of Savannah, in the face of rising crime, in the face of rising poverty, increased forced displacement, and we also have to talk about the element, well, I'll let you talk about the dynamic, Chuck, that Stevens Day, the fact that Stevens Day, coupled with this threat, could increase those adverse implications for us.
I've been talking a lot more about this, I think, in the last several months, and I'll preface the argument with, I'm not, for repealing Stevens Day today. It's not like I'm looking to end that exemption. Stevens Day is a property tax exemption passed by the state legislature that allows a severely discounted rate for people who own and live in their own home. So if you have a mortgage and you live in your own house, it's very likely you already enjoy this exemption. And look, it's great to subsidize homeowners. Homeownership, having a healthy level of homeownership is important in our community. But at the same time, when you look in the aggregate of the taxation over the last 10 years, especially, you have a disproportionate amount of property taxes that are being passed along to non-Stevens Day properties. Non-Stevens Day properties are basically any business property and anybody who rents for their primary residence. If you pay rent, you are paying a property tax bill
Mm-hmm.
for that landlord. And so because of the Stevens Day exemptions, anytime I think about property tax increases, and make no mistake, we have had property tax increases the last 2 consecutive years by this council's majority. We are disproportionately hitting renters and the working poor and the middle class, who largely do not own property to live in and rent for their primary residences. So I'm always kind of thinking about those people, because we have a heavy service economy built around this tourism industry. And because the wages are so, not prevailing as high as they should be, anything we do to pass along costs to that group of people is, in general, in my opinion, not really the right thing to do. Not when there are so many winners of our age, the SCADs, the home builders, the tourism industry, the ports. These institutions need to pay their fair share before we continue to come back to the taxpayers to ask them to pay more. So I know that everybody is looking at their ballots coming up, and you will see this T-SPLOST referendum. There's some good projects in there. The folks in the Highlands know about the troubles of Benton Boulevard and have been dealing with that. And that's the city's #1 project in it. But it's really hard for me to justify, asking people, remember, sales tax is a regressive tax. It hits everyone at the bottom the worst in terms of proportion. I'm not really interested in asking those people to sacrifice more when they're already being squeezed so hard.
And that's why I struggle with supporting anything with the millage rate not consistent with a rollback, because we have lost in place. Loss was initially passed in 1999, and we know that loss is generated, half of it by the citizens of Savannah and half of it by visitors. And
That's right.
so we reverse, or when we go back, Chuck, and we look at the foundation that's already been laid, we have to now ask the question, well, why are we making the kinds of decisions that we are making now? For 2 years, this council has had the ability to roll the millage rate back. If we were working in concert with Chatham County, we could essentially become known as the government, both county and citywide, that showed and demonstrated that we really cared about the citizens of Savannah, particularly in the fiscal climate that we find ourselves in. But instead of offsetting property taxes for individuals, we seem to be on this trajectory of increasing and continuing on this road. And now, in the face of this major threat to the city of Savannah, and that's what I want citizens to hear me say tonight. I want the citizens of Savannah to hear me say tonight that this, essentially, the position that the chairman of Chatham County, Chester Ellis, has taken where loss negotiations are concerned, is essentially a real threat to the citizens and property owners of Savannah. And he has essentially done this in the face of firing the county manager. We've done this in the face, and there's been other questionable actions by Chester Ellis that's consistent with resurrecting Tabitha Odell and appointing her to the board that resulted in the firing of Miss
Bakara.
Bakara Malden. And we know the struggles that our district attorney, Shalana Cook Jones, is now facing as a result of some of his management, even the Chatham County tax assessors. So, Chuck, I want to fast forward a little bit, and we can double back and talk more about loss. But when we see the leaders of the county and the city making these kinds of decisions, can you help me help our listeners and viewers tonight understand just how much this hurts this community, this county, and this city?
It's a classic failure of leadership locally at both levels of city and county government. These negotiations are being led by Chairman Ellis and Mayor Van Johnson. Okay, so there's really no other place to pass the buck to than those two. And so I want to highlight, some failures of both of these men. Chester Ellis, Chairman Ellis, to fire your county manager in the exact middle of these negotiations, pretty much at the moment where they broke down, is when he was suspended and then subsequently fired. There has been no public admission as to why this county manager was fired. They're apparently going back and forth on negotiations for a severance that has not been signed by the county. There's a lot of explanations there that really need explaining. But, Mayor Van Johnson, to use city tax dollars to hire and pay for a federal line prosecutor to work out of City Hall in direct undermining of our independently elected Democratic Party District Attorney Shalina Cook Jones, right? That direct kind of undermining when, from the chairman's perspective, one of the reasons he's asking for more money is to try and clear some of the backlog at the DA's office. I'm sure that that's in there, but again, it's not really a good, show of leadership by either of these men. They are playing chicken, with each other over a $100+ million per year general fund revenue source for all of the county and all the municipalities. I expected better, from both men. But we've, continually been disappointed by, men in leadership in this town for quite some time. So it's not like it's something that's new.
And, and I want to just reiterate, Chuck, the irony is 68% of lost funds are generated by Savannah taxes, and we only take away 51%.
And the reason, there's a reason for that, actually. I think in the first one, the citizen, I think when Floyd Adams was mayor, the first loss, they wanted to get all of the dollar for dollar ratchet revenue. But I think strategically over the years, the city leadership understood that as long as the gap between what we generate and what we receive, as long as that's primarily going to the other municipalities like Port Wentworth and Garden City and Thunderbolt, municipalities that we as a city need to be vibrant and strong. We need good neighbors in this county. So I think as long as we've got that type of understanding, what Lost was not designed to be was a county first funding source. It was designed to offset the need to raise property taxes dramatically on our citizens and to have some equity in the funding of the general fund from both visitors and residents, because I think it's about 56% paid for by visitors and tourists, and the rest is paid for by locals. So, we really do need this funding. We really need people to call their county commissioners, and every single county commissioner is going to have to take a vote one way or another sooner or later on this deal. The more advocacy and contact we can have with these elected officials, especially, I would say, if you live in the 8th district, that's where the chairman lives. It's the west side. It's former Mayor Floyd Adams' son, Kenny Adams, is a commissioner out there. I'd especially encourage people to contact Commissioner Adams, 7th District Commissioner Kicklighter. I think there's got to be a good group of commissioners that come together and really hold Chairman Ellis to a better standard in these negotiations, because look, guys, the alternative is just a really, really bad couple of years where your rent goes up $300, $400 a month again in the next lease renewal. And the problem with letting it go is that even if we come back in 2 years and we vote on Lost again under better terms for the city, or even just keeping the same terms, it's hard to ask landlords to come back down after we've passed along our costs to them. Even if it comes down in the future, they're going to be scared. What's the uncertainty? What if this happens again down the road?
Right.
So we really need to set that certainty in the rental market with what the property taxes will be. And so I really hope that people will put the pressure on. And by the time, Alderwoman, you guys get to your budgeting round in December here, I really hope that we've got a deal on the table, or it's going to be a wild 18 months of campaigns. Because I want to remind everybody, I call it the Savannah cycle is beginning right now. And the Savannah cycle is kind of the moment from a governor's election to the next governor's election, because between November of this year and November in 2 years, we've got governor, state senate, state house, Congress, U.S. senator. We got all the city council next year. We got the entire county commission, including the chairman, the year after in 24. there's got to be hell to pay to these elected leaders
Yeah.
if they
And
don't come to the table and make a deal.
and that's what I want people to remember, and that's what I want people to know, which is why I had you on tonight, Mr. Feagin, because ultimately, as someone stated, this is a breach of fiscal responsibility and fiscal duty, in addition to a breach, in my opinion, of the Constitution. And so I want to say to Chester Ellis and to all individuals on the county commission, if we do not come to some agreement that makes sense to the bottom line of Savannah's budget, the most vulnerable city right now in this county, and if this chairman gets away with this, every single person on that commission who supports this will be in jeopardy. And that's as simple as it is. Uh, we will continue to educate the citizens of Savannah. We will continue to educate the citizens of this county. And we will continue to help them remember when the time comes, we will help them remember where this all could have been right and where it all went wrong. And so we again want to thank you, Mr. Feagin, for tuning in tonight and helping us to educate our citizens. I feel like this was an amazing snapshot where you broke down loss in layman's terms and a very succinct and efficient manner. And I hope that you will commit to coming back again as we continue to go through these processes. And I also want to say that myself, Alderwoman at Large for Post 1, and Alderwoman Blakely, Alderwoman at Large Post 2, who garnered the most votes in a citywide election, and I garnered the second most votes in a citywide election. We, more than anybody, including the mayor on our current council, and the two of us were left out of these negotiations.
Of course, absolutely. So, this is on the majority. It's on Van, but it's also on Chairman Ellis. Let's just be clear. This time, it's not just one level of government. We have the men who run the majority on these boards, the county commission and the city of Savannah majority council. You know, these are the men who are responsible if these negotiations fail. And I'm not rooting for them to fail. I want to make that clear. I'm not really rooting for them to fail. I wish they'd come out to an agreement. Look, if the county needs to go from 23% share to 29% share, I think that's within historical norms. It's reasonable. The backlog of cases at the district attorney's office, Lord knows we need some help there. So it's just not reasonable to ask to go from 23 to 50.
If we really cared about the backlog or anything about the DA's office, you tell me, why is it that the mayor right now is planning to meet with all judges of Superior Court, State Court, and Recorder's Court to see how he can remove Shalana Cook Jones from having purview over cases in those courts? So
that's never going to happen. That's not how the law is set up.
About interpersonal relations and the lack thereof. This is about egos, and we are consistently being governed by these individuals who have tyrannical styles of leading and governing. And so, in as much as we can be called or considered loudmouths, what we want to say is people would not know unless we are talking, because those individuals haven't shared any of this information with the public. And our media affiliates and outlets outside of Savannah Agenda, they have merely glossed over and haven't touched these issues in a way in which you did tonight, which is to dial it back to where the everyday layperson could understand it and recognize the adverse implications that it will have on them and their households. Right now, we not only have a housing crisis here in Savannah, we have an issue where everyday working people, working class citizens, are being forced out of various communities throughout the city. And it's acts and behaviors and decisions like this that contribute to the deprivation of the citizens in our community. So again, Chuck, I want to give you an opportunity to close out, and just want to thank you for coming on, and ask that you come back to to have us continue to educate our electorate.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. I really appreciate you bringing me on the show. I did put a link to our live event in October that I hope that you'll participate in with us for Better Savannah's 100th episode coming up. So, we've been doing a lot of episodes. You can find more content, kind of along these policy lines. And, I just really want to, thank this audience for tuning in. This is a strong leader that, is leading us in the right direction, just does not have the majority votes on council to be doing the things we'd like to see our city government do. So get involved, stay engaged, and just know that leaders like this really do have love for everyday Savannahans, and not just those that can afford the next property tax increase or a higher sales tax. So I really appreciate it, and I'm gonna get out of here. I'll see you guys real soon.
Well, thank you so much. Again, ladies and gentlemen, we are grateful to Chuck Feagin of Better Savannah, and I would be remiss if I did not mention Mr. John McMasters. These men have undergird a lot of what we have benefited from by way of information and education through their platform at Better Savannah. So we ask that you follow them as well. And we're not looking for fans and followers, but what we are looking for is a community of faithful citizens who care about this city. And if we want to keep Savannah, our beautiful city of Savannah, healthy and whole and filled with the wonderful culture of all of the creatures that dwell within her, we really have to stand up, and speak out. And so without further ado, I want to say to you, good night, Savannah, and we love you. Thank you.